Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of Sarastro's Star Wars painting series. In this episode, we're going to paint Fenn Signis from Fantasy Flight's Star Wars Imperial Assault. Here are the steps we'll be using to bring him to life. After filling one or two gaps with some green stuff, we'll prime the miniature with a white primer, although black would also be fine. We'll then apply the base colours along with some metallic dry brushing for the gun. We'll then shade the miniature with some dark washes, before adding the highlights. Our finishing touches will include a selective orange glaze, along with some additional clothing details and some battle damage and weathering. Let's begin. To prepare the miniature, I'm filling in a couple of gaps where the arms join the back with some green stuff, and you can refer to episode 10 for more detail on how to do this. I've then chosen to prime Fenn in white, although given that he has a fair number of dark areas, black would also be fine. Once primed, we're ready to begin painting. For Fenn's gun, I've chosen to combine some metallic dry brushing with some additional manual highlights later on. So I'm going to begin by using a dark grey mix of black and Mechanicus standard grey to provide the base colour. I'm then going to give it a good dry brush with some Leadbelcher. Bear in mind, we will be dulling this down with a black wash later on. We can now paint the remaining black areas of the miniature, which means the gloves, the various pouches, belts and straps, and the sidearm. I've also chosen to paint the rim of the knee pads and the accompanying straps in black too, although you might prefer a shade of brown instead. Likewise, I've also chosen to paint the boots black. And finally, the arm patch. If you've primed in white as I have, you'll find a couple of coats are necessary to produce a nice solid grey. We can now give the skin a base coat of Bugman's glow. Before applying the pale beige colour for the clothes, I'm going to first neaten up some of the adjoining black areas with some Ceramite White. This is because the beige I'm using is somewhat opaque and will therefore be difficult to cover the black areas with. Ceramite White, however, will do a good job of repriming the area, ready for the beige to go on top. The beige I'm using is Screaming Skull mixed with a small amount of Fire Dragon Bright. And I'm now painting the trousers, the lower sleeves, and the lighter parts of the helmet with this. For the darker parts of the combat suit, I'm using an equal mix of Ep.18 and Rhinox Hide. I'm also using this for the knee pads. Finally, we can paint the scarf, and I'm using an equal mix of Temple Guard Blue and Mechanicus Standard Grey. And now we're ready to do some shading. We're now going to use a selection of shades to bring some depth to the miniature, starting with some Reikland Fleshshade for the skin. Next, I'm using some Nuln Oil for the gun and the other black parts of the figure. I'm then using an equal mix of Drakenhof Nightshade and Nuln Oil for the scarf. Finally, I'm using some Agrax Earthshade for all of the light and dark brown areas. Once dry, we're ready to begin adding the highlights. I'm going to highlight the skin using the same sequence of tones used for Han Solo in episode 16. So I'll be starting with a reapplication of the base tone, Bugman's Glow. After that, I'm mixing in an equal quantity of Cadian Fleshtone. Followed with some pure Cadian Fleshtone. This will still cover the main flat and raised areas of the skin. Now we can mix in some Kislev Flesh and begin adding some smaller, more selective highlights. And finally, we can add a small touch of pure Kislev Flesh to places like the cheekbones, top of the nose, and the fingertips. For the pale fabric, we can begin by applying the original Screaming Skull and Fire Dragon Bright mix. We can then lighten this with the simple addition of a little white, and focus our highlights on the upturned surfaces of the fabric. I'm then adding one further portion of white and providing a final highlight, focusing on the raised peaks in the fabric and the topmost parts of the legs, sleeves, and the ridges on the helmet. For the dark brown parts of the outfit, we can once again begin with a reapplication of the base tone, and naturally we want to avoid the folds and recesses which we want to remain dark. To create the lighter highlights, I'm mixing some Karak Stone with an optional hint of Scrag Brown, and using this to lighten the base tone mix. Notice that I'm highlighting the knee pads to get lighter towards the upper half. For the helmet, I'm aiming to subtly build up the highlights towards the front and just providing a thin edge highlight at the back. I'm adding additional portions of the Karak Stone into the mix to provide gradually lighter and lighter highlights. we can keep lightening up until we get to a final thin hit of pure Karak Stone. Next, we're going to highlight the scarf, once again bringing the raised parts of the fabric back up to the original base colour using our Temple Guard Blue and Mechanicus Standard Grey mix. I'm then adding increasing portions of Administratum Grey to provide the lighter highlights. I ended up lightening the mix in 3 stages, narrowing the area of highlight each time. There's nothing wrong with reapplying a little shade selectively into any areas you may feel needs darkening to further maximise the sense of depth. Next, I'm going to highlight the black areas of the clothing and accessories with some Eshin Grey. We're not looking to cover large areas here, but just pick out the raised elements that we think might catch the most light. I'm then mixing in a little Administratum Grey and adding a few final highlights. Now we can highlight the gun, and I'm beginning with some pure Administratum Grey. Here I just want to enhance and strengthen the highlights already provided by our dry brush. lightening the mix with the addition of some white. Because Fenn's gun appears quite clean and shiny, I'm going to finish the highlights with a small hit of pure, thinned white. We're now ready for some finishing touches. I'm going to begin by painting the metallic buckles on the clothing with some Leadbelcher, although you could also do this in the base colours stage. And I'm following this with a simple black wash to finish. I'm now going to neaten up the arm patch with a fresh coat of dark grey, before painting the rebel symbol with some Mephiston Red. A vertical line down the centre of the patch, followed by a curved arm coming up each side, should give us a reasonable approximation of the rebel symbol. The tone may need to be strengthened with an additional thin layer or two. Finally, I'm going to increase the vibrancy by applying a layer of Evil Sunz Scarlet. The next finishing touch I'm going to add is an orange glaze to enrich the tone of the dark brown clothing, and the helmet in particular. For this, I'm using 3 parts Lamenters Yellow and 1 part Bloodletter. I'm also thinning the glaze with a couple of drops of Lahmian Medium. After the first layer, I've chosen to add a second to strengthen the colour of the helmet. This gives us a more pleasing tone and one that more closely matches that of the character art. Now I'm going to add some battle damage. Taking a similar approach to that used in the Boba Fett tutorial, I'm going to begin by marking out various small battle scars with some Celestra Grey. I'm then going to apply just a touch of Runefang Steel to the larger scratches. The same simple technique can also be used on the knee pads. Now I'm going to paint Fenn's sunglasses. To do this, we could just use an opaque dark purple, but a more subtle effect can be achieved through the use of a purple glaze. Here I'm using 2 parts red to 1 part blue, along with a little medium. We can then add as many layers of this as we like, depending on how dark we want the glasses to be. The advantage of using a glaze is that we can still see some of the skin tone beneath showing through. 3 or more layers may be applied to create the effect you're happy with. I'm now going to add some reflections, and for that I'm using an equal mix of Russ Grey and White Scar, and just a hint of Evil Sunz Scarlet. Here we want to add a small glint quite far to one side of each of the lenses. If you're not happy with the reflections, as I was with my first attempt, you can always paint over the glasses with an opaque dark purple. We can then add a smaller glint of pure white to really make the glasses sparkle. A final thin layer of glaze could be added to help blend the reflections in. Next, I'm going to provide a thinned blue glaze to the chin area to help subtly vary the skin tone. I've also chosen to add a little weathering to the boots and legs with a light stippling of Steel Legion drab. After a matte spray, I'm rebasing the miniature and then finishing him off with a layer of gloss varnish for the glasses and the boots. And this completes Fenn Signis. Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying the series, then do please subscribe. Additionally, if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing and help me create more, head over to the Patreon page where, if you become a patron, you'll also gain access to additional content such as behind-the-scenes videos, photos, and Q&As. Don't forget, you can also connect with me on Facebook and Twitter. My special thanks go out to all of the kind patrons who are already helping fund the hours that I put into this work. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Imperial Assault. Happy painting!